In this session, we're going to look at the poem The Gun, and we're going to look at the ways in which some of the kind of more simpler ideas in this poem could actually be explored in a little bit more detail. In some ways, it's actually more difficult to consider poems like The Gun that have a very quite simple narrative and almost quite a simple message, and find something more meaningful to say about them. Often in class, although the idea itself is quite engaging and very accessible, it's very difficult in an essay to really run with some of these ideas. So we're going to look at ways in which my students have kind of tried to explore some of these ideas in a bit more detail, but it would be great if you want to reach out and connect with some of the discussions that you've had with this poem and see whether what we were thinking is on the same lines. Again, as we always do, we're starting with features of form and the ways in which this poem uses varied lengths of stanzas in order to present its narrative. What's important about the poem is the use of punctuation. So on lots of occasions, the punctuation creates quite an abrupt tone, and that's very deliberate at times. There's a purpose to the abrupt nature of this poem, so that's something that we really do have to focus on when we're exploring it in a bit more detail. What's interesting about this poem, and one of the things that you can really explore with it, and its potential for connection as well, is that a lot of the poems in the Decade Anthology use this kind of opening narrative style in first person address. But with The Gun, there's a very strange sense of the second person. There's an awareness of the reader in almost an attempt to persuade the reader into considering how something deviant like owning or using a gun could actually be quite exhilarating, and it kind of glamorizes and creates a sense of advantage, I guess, to owning a gun, which might be quite interesting to consider with some more modern arguments about firearms and personal possession, etc. Bringing a gun into a house changes it. The opening declaration there, it's obviously an argument that can't really be refuted. It certainly does, but it's almost as if this statement is kind of opening up all of these different arguments about the ways in which guns could be used within households, as methods of self-defense, as hunting, or to some more perhaps dangerous methods in relation to purpose. If we're considering again the use of present tense there, the immediacy that's created by bringing a gun into the house, almost as if the narrator is speaking to us at that moment of arrival, gun in hand, and we get that sort of almost kind of like powerful, a little bit maybe sinister tone. Changes it. Now the reference to it there could be quite abstract in the sense that we don't know exactly what it's referring to. Presumably it's the house, obviously, with the extension of the sentence, but it could actually have far more wide-reaching consequences in the sense that it's not just the house, it's the people in it, it's the culture, it's the atmosphere, it's the dynamic within the house as well. Again, this can't really be argued because it would actually change all of these things, so it's quite nice to maybe speculate on the different ways in which you could interpret the focus of it. You lay it on the kitchen table. Now the use of second person address there, again, it's addressing the reader as if the reader is familiar with this action, as if they too are in agreement, as if the you becomes this collective sense of normality to simply lay your gun on the table, stretched out like something dead. Now there's so many ways in which you could interpret some of the imagery here. And the idea of stretching it out almost kind of personifies the gun itself and gives it this kind of feature of trying to take up space and trying to territorialize the kitchen table. Then you've got the notion that it can't really be personification because it's like something dead. So it's actually the complete opposite of personification. It's objectifying the object, which is quite an interesting technique through the simile there, and also just the juxtaposition of something dead lying on the kitchen table. So we've got this sort of notion that actually should you put dead things on the table, and then the reminder that eating meat on a table is eating something that is dead. So we've got some of these sort of more contradictory perhaps arguments about the notion of hunting, veganism, vegetarianism, etc. We've got a lot of these ideas that could be used to explore this image of the gun spread out like something dead itself, and the enjambment there gives some sort of real credence and emphasis to the image of the gun. It gives it some power.